Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining today's Agricultural and Food Research Initiative Sustainable Agricultural Systems Program webinar. Please note that all participant lines will be muted throughout the call to reduce background noise until the Q&A portion of the call. I will provide instructions on how to ask a question at that time. You are welcome to submit written questions as well, and these will also be addressed during Q&A. To submit a written question, use the chat panel on the lower right-hand side of your screen and choose All Panelists from the Send To drop-down menu. If you require technical assistance, please send a private chat to the event producer via the chat panel. With that, I'll turn the call over to Dr. Rachel Melnick, National Program Leader, USDA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Rachel, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and start our webinar for the AFRI SAS program. So the goals of this webinar are going to first and foremost answer your questions about the program and provide some clarification. We would like to stress to everyone that answers to most of the questions are in the RFA, so please read the RFA before putting together your project. So the agenda for this meeting is going to be a welcome, an overview of the AFRI Sustainable Agricultural Systems Program, and then we're going to spend most of the time focused on a question and answer period. So participants in today's room are myself, Rachel Melnick. We have Robin Shoemaker, Adele Terzillo, Carlos Ortiz, and Matt Noaju with us. So Sustainable Agricultural Systems, fiscal year 2019 is this program's second year under the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative. The budget for this year's program is $90 million, and the award size is up to $1 million. Based upon that, we estimate the number of awards to be roughly 9. We always like to stress that this is the progression of what was formerly the AFRI challenge areas to a new multidisciplinary systems level work. So this will be the RFA that you will see. The SAS program solicits creative, visionary projects that are developed by transdisciplinary teams, integrate research, education, and extension activities, effectively use a systems approach, promote convergence of science and technology, solve present and future challenges in food and agricultural systems. One of the big questions we got through the program last year were some of the definitions about what is transdisciplinary and what is a systems approach. I would like to draw your attention to the RFA because within the RFA is a link to the AFRI SAS glossary, and these definitions are located right in the glossary. So for the terms of this program, transdisciplinary is a multidiscipline approach that brings biological and physical scientists together with economists and social scientists to address challenges in a holistic manner. In terms of the AFRI SAS program, the systems approach is any process of estimating or inferring how local policies, actions, or changes influence the state of the neighboring universe. A framework based on the belief that the component parts of a system can best be understood in the context of relationships with each other and with other systems, rather than in isolation. So what we define agricultural systems for on page 8 of the RFA is agricultural systems are inclusive of value chains from production to consumption of food and other agricultural products, and from traditional open field farms, ranches, and managed forests to controlled production in built environments across the rural-urban continuum. So when you're looking at the RFA and you're thinking about putting together your proposal to define a system, we ask you as the applicant to define the system under investigation, and that should be included in your letter of intent as well as your application. But we really like to stress we have the long-term goals listed in the RFA that we will be discussing in the future, no one 5-year, $10 million project will be able to achieve one goal. So what we really think, it's not that one project is going to be able to achieve all of these goals in the long-term perspective. It's that all of the projects for the program together will help to achieve these goals and improve sustainable agricultural systems. So looking at sustainable agricultural systems, we state that applicants should describe what system their project is addressing and what problems they are pursuing. We like to stress that a system should consist of more than a single disciplinary view of a problem. We should have integration of multiple components, which will require multiple disciplines to effectively examine the problem. The core is a transdisciplinary component involving the full integration of disciplines, yielding a new scientific approach to discovery. So these are things to take into account when putting your team together and thinking about your system. So the real key here is applications must address one or more of the long-term goals that are listed in the request for applications. So goal 1 is to increase profitability in agriculture. Goal 2 is to catalyze the bioeconomy. And goal 3 is to enhance the contribution of food and agriculture to the health of the nation. So more specifically, Goal 1 and projects that are addressing Goal 1 should increase agricultural profitability by reducing input use, expanding and creating new markets, increasing productivity, and curbing production losses due to biotic and abiotic factors. And if you look at this goal in the RSA, there are actually 2 sub-bullets listed underneath it. And we would like to stress that for these sub-bullets, which are develop or improve system models and develop system modeling approaches, that the projects addressing Goal 1 should address one or both of these sub-bullets. So Goal 2, projects addressing Goal 2 should foster economic development and prosperity in rural America by catalyzing the bioeconomy through value-added innovation, including production of high-value bio-based chemicals and other products using agricultural feedstocks. And under this goal in the RFA, there are 3 sub-bullets. And projects that are addressing Goal 2 should address all 3 of these. So the RFA actually says should address the following, and we just want to stress that because we've received a question or 2 about this, that if you're addressing Goal 2, you should address all 3 of the sub-bullets. And lastly, Goal 3, projects that will be addressing Goal 3 should look at how they should enhance food and agriculture's contribution to nation's health through development, adoption, and application of new or existing technologies, tools, education, and other resources to ensure access to sufficient quantities of safe, nutritious, and affordable food. And in the RSA, under Goal 3, there are 2 sub-bullets. And we would just like to highlight for Goal 3, you should address one or both. That is at the discretion of the project to choose which you would address. So for the AFRI SAS program for fiscal year 19, we are only soliciting coordinated agricultural projects and strengthening coordinated agricultural projects grant types. We are not soliciting conference proposals, research proposals, and the other type of projects that come into other AFRI programs. We would like to highlight for those that are interested in inputting a strengthening CAP, eligibility is based upon the F-score or established programs to stimulate competitive research. If you are at an institution that's located in a USDA F-score state, you would be eligible to apply for a strengthening coordinated agricultural project grant. And that is listed in Part 8D of the RFA. If you are at a minority-serving institution, which is defined as 50% single or combination of minority groups that are not among the most successful institutions, or if you're at a smaller mid-sized institution, which is an enrollment of 17,500 or less that are not among the most successful, you would be eligible to apply for a strengthening cap. You would just be able to select this on our AFRI form, and what this would mean is there's a set-aside set of funds under our Food and Agricultural Science Enhancement Funds that we are able to then fund projects within that program to help build capacity. So if you're at one of those institutions, we would like to highlight that for you. And if you want to know if your state is an EPSCoR state for this year, please look at the RFA, and you'll be able to see the listing of states. So of project types that are coming into the program, we are only accepting integrated projects. And these projects must include research and extension and education. All three functions are required. And we'd like to highlight that no more than 2/3 of a project's budget may be allocated to a single function. So we really would like to have projects that have a strong component of all three coming into the program. What is considered education for the SAS program? An education activity or teaching activity means formal classroom instruction, laboratory instruction, and practicum experience in the food and agricultural sciences and other related matters such as faculty development, student recruitment and services, curriculum development, instructional materials and equipment, and innovative teaching methods. We would like to stress that routine use of graduate students and postdoctoral students as personnel on a research project is not considered education for the purposes of this program. That would be considered under research. Only active engagement of students in the scholarship of research extension projects is considered education. So what is considered extension under SAS? An extension activity means an act or process that delivers science-based knowledge and informal education programs to people, enabling them to make practical decisions. It should be a high degree of engagement among researchers, extension, or other engagement personnel and relevant stakeholders is required from the inception through implementation of the project. So types of applications that are coming in, we are accepting new applications, and since this is the second year of the program, we are now also accepting resubmitted applications for proposals submitted in fiscal year 2018 to the AFRI SAS program. We'd like to highlight some other requirements that if you're going to be putting one of these proposals together, you should consider. All projects and proposals are required to have a management plan. Details for this can be seen on page 10 of the RFA. You're required to have a data management plan, and details for this are on page 11 of the RFA. And lastly, you're also required to have a logic model, and details for that are also on page 11 of the RFA. Eligibility for applicants to integrated projects to AFRI include colleges and universities, 1994 land-grant institutions, Hispanic-serving agricultural colleges and universities. And this information is listed on page 15 of the RFA. Small businesses, federal agencies, and people within all those different categories are not eligible to be leads on applications to the AFRI SAS program. However, they can be collaborators and receive a sub-award for the program. Now we'd like to address matching, and this is on page 16 of the RFA, and this states that a dollar-for-dollar matching fund from non-federal sources are required if the work is commodity-specific and not national in scope. We would like to state that NIFA may waive the matching requirements if the results of the project are likely to be applicable to agricultural commodities generally, or if the project involves a minor commodity. We also like to highlight, especially for this year, indirect costs, because due to the Farm Bill, there's been a change in indirect costs from the 18 program to the 19 program. So for this program, indirect cost is limited to 30% of the total federal funds, including subawards, provided to your institution's officially negotiated indirect cost rate, whichever is less. So if your institution's officially negotiated indirect cost rate is under 30%, you would use that. If it is over 30%, the indirect cost rate cannot be more than 30% of the total federal funds, including the subawards. We'd like to highlight that we would like to encourage and applications may include collaborations with international partners, but may only be submitted by eligible U.S. institutions. If you're going to collaborate with an international partner, they would have to be a subaward. And such applications must clearly demonstrate benefit to the United States and U.S. agriculture. So this is what everyone always wants to know. What is the timeline for our program? If you're interested in attending the next webinar, that will be on May 1st at 10 a.m. Letters of intent are due June 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You will receive a response to your letter of intent no later than June 28th. And then the application deadline for the program is September 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Very important to make sure you get it in by 5 p.m. We would like to remind everyone to submit their letters of intent to the AFRI SAS inbox, which is listed there, and any details on the format for the letters of intent are included in the RFA. There's a link that actually gives you a really great guide to the AFRI SAS letter of intent. You should submit full applications to grants.gov. We like to always tell everyone your application will be rejected or not reviewed if you are not an eligible applicant, if you did not submit a letter of intent, if you are missing required items or they're in the wrong format, if you use the wrong application package from grants.gov, or even if you submit 1 second after the deadline. We take that deadline time very seriously. So we always like to remind everyone, do not wait until the last minute to submit. It is not easy to troubleshoot error messages from grants.gov. And the critical time step on the application is when it actually goes through without an error, not when the submission process is initiated. So some additional resources, you can always visit the AFRI SAS webpage. We have a wonderful frequently asked questions document, and many of your questions might be located right there, so please visit that. And if you're wondering about definitions such as transdisciplinary or systems approach, please visit the AFRI SAS glossary page. So in summary, we have an AFRI SAS inbox that is manned by the AFRI implementation team, and there is always someone answering it to be able to answer your emails. We also have a phone number if you would like to call, but we like to stress, read the RFA, read the RFA, read the RFA, and finally read the RFA. Many of your questions and format questions and different items are answered in the RFA. And we also find that reading the RFA is very helpful before you submit your project to ask for fit to program. So look over the RFA. And with that, we are ready to answer any of your questions. And I see that there is actually one in the chat window right now. It is, will the webinar that is on May 1st cover substantially the same information? It will be a very similar webinar. We host it at 2 different dates to allow for people who cannot attend this webinar to have another opportunity to ask questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you'd like to ask a verbal question, please press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. You may also submit a written chat question. Please select all panelists in the Send To drop-down menu and type in your question.
Okay, we have a question coming through the chat box about could we discuss the scope of projects that would be deemed competitive? In other words, should it be multi-state or have geographic diversity? Also, when will information related to the 2018 RFA be released so we can see the scopes of those funded projects? The scopes of the funded projects and the abstracts of those will not be released until those awards have officially been processed. So we will update that within the FAQ, but that will be some time from now because they've been notified, but they are not official, and we cannot publicly post that until they are official. And in terms of scope of products that would be deemed competitive, it is hard to define that for just one project because every system and every problem is so different that we always try to stress for some problems maybe multi-state is the correct and having multi-institution is correct, but for others that might not be the best or might not be strong. So there is no one-size-fits-all. It really is dependent on the system and the problem you're addressing, but would stress to put together a strong transdisciplinary team. Next question is, can we request in the budget a vehicle needed for the research and extension work? Would you like to answer one?
I'm saying it's always a tough thing to do to request a vehicle or to request building something, a fixed equipment. We have a regulation for that throughout the whole NEPA, but again, the question would be, why will the applicant need a vehicle for that specific project that only lasts 5 years? Is it an alternative of renting something to get the project through? It's a tough one to get through our approval process here.
Yeah, so if you go to look at 2 CFR 200, which is a legislation, there actually is language that describes that. So you would need to be able to make justification for why you would buy it opposed to leasing it. Yes. Can we read the aspects of the SAS project selected for fiscal year 2018? We do not have them publicly posted yet because we are still going through the administrative process to make those awards official. And until those awards are official, we cannot post that. So we will have them in the future. They will be posted to the AFRI SAS webpage. There's another question on should proposals have a commercialization component or an industry partner. That is not a requirement of the program. If you feel that an industry partner would be beneficial to your research, extension, and education, that is allowed.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, you can press #2 to ask a verbal question, or you may send a chat to all panelists through the WebEx chat feature.
We'd also like to remind everyone who's on the webinar that if you come up with a question after this webinar ends, please feel free to send it to the AFRI SAS inbox, and we will be able to answer that question for you. We have a question that says, do we need to submit a letter of intent for resubmission of a 2008 proposal that was not selected for funding? Yes, we are requiring that, and that is actually stated in the RFA. We have a question of, would you please describe what the ideal integrated project looks like?
Well, an integrated project, and that is a requirement. Maybe you have another definition for that. For us here at NIFA, an integrated project means research and extension and education for staff. We have no other people who have been applying to other programs. You can have a research plus just one component, and it will meet the requirement for integrated projects. But for this program, we are asking for all three. And an ideal integrated project will be one that actually has those three components, and the three components are well balanced. Like we say the budget should not be more than 2/3 for one component, and those components should be well integrated, not just like pieces put together that do not integrate very well. And we see a lot of that, where you see the education component, the extension, really things that were dropped in the project without, thinking of how to blend them together.
Our next question is for SAS Goal 2, addressing bioeconomy challenges. Would the development of forestry feedstocks be aligned with this topic goal area? You can use a forestry feedstock for this goal. What we would really stress to everyone is it's impossible to answer that without being able to make sure that your project is aligned with the long-term goal as stated in the RSA. So if you were developing a forestry feedstock and it was addressing the components as listed on the RSA, then yes, that would be a fit to the program. We have another question of, will the transcript of the webinar be available? Yes, we will be posting this webinar at the end, probably in a week or two. And we have another question, would a system definition that includes a subsection of the entire supply chain from production to consumption be appropriate? Again, without knowing your project, it's hard to fully define fit to program, but that could be a fit to program as long as it was properly addressing the goals. We have a question on how many proposals were received last year and what was the funding rate. We received 63 full proposals, and we funded 8 of them, so it was a 12% success rate. My colleague across the room wanted me to also highlight that while we received 62 full proposals, we actually received 363 letters of intent for the program. So we have a question on how close to commercialization or what TRL level are chemicals and products expected to be at the end of the project for Goal 2. This is a research project, so it's hard for us to answer that, but we don't have a goal saying that we expect this to be commercialized at the end of the project. This is looking at some more fundamental research, education, and extension leading to the development of bio-based economy. And really want to highlight for these goals, we don't expect that one project is going to be the project to meet that long-term goal. It is the sum of projects funded by the entire program, both last year and this year and in future years, that will help us to achieve those goals, if that's helpful. So we have another question on what were some of the common problematic issues with previous proposals other than not being well integrated?
You know, some of the things that we have seen from last year's proposal was that a lot of people are still thinking in terms of the challenge area that we had before. They are still thinking in terms of the multidisciplinarity. Here, in this case, you know, we want to see a well integration of those disciplines, which was not the case. A lot of people are failing to define a system that they are working with. They have a research topic. Let's say someone dealing with CRISPR and want to do a lot of great stuff, but that was not a system to us. So those are some of the key things that we have found in the previous applications. We also noticed that a lot of people were thinking that going and talking to farmers was education. That is not education. So a lot of people were confusing education with extension. What else did we notice, Rachel?
For people maybe that were not as competitive may not have put in a good justification for the problem and how your project was going to be a solution to that problem. And just generally the integration between the research, extension, and education. So having those components actually work together as opposed to having research hand the results off to extension just to translate it. So that would be things that were strong. One thing I'd like to stress is this is transdisciplinary. So while you might be an expert in looking at one specific topic, you should not assume that every single person who reads your proposal is going to be an expert. So if you're working with something you really want to stress, and don't make the assumption that that person is an expert. They might be reviewing your proposal to look at it for the extension components. That might be their specialist. We definitely will have people that align with your scientific expertise, but this is a transdisciplinary panel, so you really want to make sure that you don't make any assumptions of the knowledge of the reviewers either. Please make sure that if you're working on something that's a major invasive issue, that you state that it's an invasive or a wide range of other things that would help to strengthen some proposals. So we are here and ready to take any of your questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, please press #2 to ask a verbal question or send a chat to all presenters.
So we have a question on how many more years we expect the SAS program to continue. We cannot define that at this time. However, there is mention of the SAS program in the fiscal year 2020 explanatory notes, which can be found on the USDA NIFA. I don't think they're on the USDA NIFA budget page or on the USDA budget page, and you can actually go ahead and look over those. Those are based upon the President's budget. We always like to remind everyone that that is contingent upon appropriations for the program. So we have a program on how should proposals address the end user. It's difficult for us to answer that because it depends who your end user is. This is, if it were commercialization, then it was easier for us to answer, but that's a different program. We actually have a small business innovation research program. So there are different ways to address end users. You can bring them in from the beginning to help them develop it. If you're doing stakeholder-driven modeling, you can do outreach and extension if that would be your end user. If you're under other end user, it might be potentially education programs. There really is no one way to do it. It really is very dependent on the project and which goals you are addressing. So we have a question, are tuition funds for graduate students allowable under this program? Yes, you can have a research assistantship included in your budget. And we have another. I was reminded to highlight that if you are including tuition funds for graduate students, which are allowable, they count towards your research budget, not your education budget, when you're looking at the no more than 2/3. So we have another question is, what is the basis of awarding 8 or 10 awards instead of giving more of the level of funding? So the basis of this program is to fund coordinated agricultural projects, which are these large-scale projects to address some larger challenges. We do have another program, the Agricultural and Food Research Initiative Foundational and Applied Sciences Program. And within that program, that would be the program we would actually highlight sending people to go ahead and look at having smaller awards to address those challenges. And absolutely, projects addressing sustainable agriculture would fit into many of the topic areas within the Foundational and Applied Sciences RFA, and that one is not yet released yet, but should be out shortly.
Education and workforce development.
And there's also the Education and Workforce Development request for application that has already been released. So that's another one of the AFRI programs that you can look at. So we have a question on, are graduate student fees allowable expenses? That would be included in tuition and fees, and that would be an allowable expense. And also one on, should subsequent proposal development questions be directed to those named within this panel or the program contacts named in the RFA? All questions related to proposal development should be sent to the contact email in the RFA, which is what's on the screen there. And all of the members of the implementation team have access to that inbox, and we will be able to address your questions. So that's really the best way, because we all log into that inbox and can see it. And we have a question about, could we talk more about one of the sub-bullets, but I'm not, for goal 1, I'm not sure what question you have related to that. So we would suggest, if you want to talk about fit to program and how your project might really address that goal, that you send a short paragraph to the AFRI SAS inbox, and we'd be able to answer whether you're addressing one and you could potentially be a fit to the program.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, please press #2 if you wish to ask a verbal question, or please type in a chat question and address it to all panelists in the Send To drop-down menu.
Yeah, so we have a question of under the bioenergy goal 2, it said value-added product. Does this include bioenergy? So it's bio-based products and value-added products. So yes, we are specifically vague because we would like the applicant to define which of the products they will be helping to develop to help build our bioeconomy. So we'd like to ask if there are any further questions at all. Either voice them through the phone or put them in the chat window, please. So since there are no further questions, we're going to stop the webinar. But as always, if you have any further questions that come up after this webinar, please feel free to send them to the AFRI fax mailbox, and we will answer them.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.